The knock at midnight. The storm arrived just after sunset. Dark clouds rolled across the frontier sky, swallowing the last traces of daylight and leaving the wilderness draped in shadow. Rain lashed against the windows of Elias Grayhawk's ranch house while wind rattled the wooden walls. The isolated ranch sat miles from the nearest settlement, surrounded by open plains and distant hills that disappeared into the darkness. Inside, Elias sat beside the fireplace, repairing a leather saddle strap. The steady crackle of burning logs filled the room. After years of ranching, he had grown accustomed to solitude. The quiet suited him. It allowed him to focus on his work and avoid the complications that seemed to follow other people. A sudden knock shattered the calm. Elias looked toward the door. No visitor would willingly travel through such weather. The knock came again. This time it was weaker. Desperate, he set the saddle aside and crossed the room quickly. As soon as he pulled the door open, a fierce gust of wind swept rain into the cabin. A woman stood on the porch. For a moment she swayed unsteadily. Then she collapsed forward. Elias caught her before she struck the floor. Her dress was soaked and torn. Mud covered the hem. Dark stains marked the fabric near her shoulder and arm. Bruises colored her skin, and several fresh cuts lined her face. She looked barely conscious. "Help me," she whispered. Then her eyes closed. Without hesitation, Elias lifted her into his arms and carried her inside. He laid her carefully on the couch near the fire and began assessing her injuries. Years on the frontier had taught him enough medicine to handle emergencies. Broken bones, animal attacks, accidents, he had seen them all. But these injuries were different. The cuts and bruises weren't random. Someone had done this to her. He cleaned the wounds with warm water and wrapped the worst injuries with fresh bandages. Throughout the process, the woman drifted in and out of awareness. Each time she stirred, she muttered the same words. "They left me for dead." The sentence unsettled him. Whoever had hurt her clearly believed she would not survive. Hours passed. The storm continued outside, while the fire crackled steadily within the cabin. Near midnight, the woman finally opened her eyes. Confusion flashed across her face before she realized she was somewhere safe. "You're awake," Elias said. She immediately tried to sit up. Pain forced her back down. "Easy." Her gaze moved around the room nervously. "Where am I?" "My ranch." Fear filled her expression. "I can't go back." Elias noticed the panic in her voice. "No one's taking you anywhere tonight." The reassurance seemed to help. For several moments, she remained silent, staring into the fire. "My name is Clara," she finally said. "Elias Grayhawk." She nodded slowly. The name appeared familiar. Most people in the territory knew of Elias. He had earned a reputation for honesty and fairness, qualities that were sometimes rare on the frontier. "You helped me," Clara said quietly. "You needed help." A faint smile appeared before fading almost immediately. The sadness behind it was impossible to miss. As the night wore on, Clara revealed small pieces of her story. She lived in a farming settlement nearly 20 miles away. She was married. She had spent years trying to build a life with her husband, Thomas Whitmore. Whenever she spoke his name, her voice grew colder. Elias listened without interruption. He sensed she needed someone willing to hear the truth. At first her complaints seemed ordinary enough. Thomas traveled frequently. He spent long periods away from home. Money often disappeared without explanation. Questions usually led to arguments. But gradually the details became darker. She spoke of lies, broken promises, unexplained absences, and the strange perfume she sometimes noticed on his clothes after returning from town. "You suspected another woman," Elias said. Clara stared into the flames. For a long time, the admissions seemed painful. "I kept telling myself I was imagining things." "What changed?" She hesitated. The room fell silent except for the wind outside. Finally, she took a slow breath. "A week ago, I followed him." Elias remained quiet. "He told me he was conducting business in town." Her hands tightened around the blanket. But he wasn't. The memory clearly haunted her. "I saw him enter a house." She swallowed hard. "And I saw who was waiting for him." The truth hung heavily in the air. He had a lover. Elias felt anger stirring beneath his calm exterior. Not because of the affair itself, because of what had happened afterward. "What did you do?" I confronted him. The answer came immediately. He promised he could explain everything. A bitter laugh escaped her. But there was nothing to explain. The fire popped loudly. Clara's eyes glistened. I thought the betrayal was the worst thing he could do. Her voice trembled. I was wrong. Elias leaned forward. "What happened?" For several seconds, she couldn't speak. When the words finally emerged, they were barely above a whisper. "He attacked me." The room seemed colder despite the fire. "He said I was ruining everything." Tears slid down her cheeks. "He beat me and left me in the storm." Elias clenched his jaw. Outside, thunder rumbled across the plains. Clara looked directly at him for the first time. Fear remained in her eyes, but so did determination. "The man I married tried to kill me." The fire crackled between them as the weight of her confession settled over the cabin. And for the first time that night, Elias realized the danger was far from over. Secrets buried beneath respectability. Morning arrived beneath a pale sky. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the prairie washed clean and silent. Sunlight filtered through the windows of Elias Grayhawk's ranch house, casting long beams across the wooden floor. Clara awoke to the smell of coffee and fresh bread. For a brief moment, she forgot where she was. Then the aches throughout her body returned, along with memories of Thomas, the attack, and the desperate journey through the storm. She sat up carefully. The wounds still hurt, but the sharpest pain had faded. Elias was standing near the stove, preparing breakfast. "You should be resting," he said without turning around. "I've rested enough." His expression suggested he disagreed. Still, he handed her a cup of coffee. The simple gesture stirred unexpected emotions within her. For months, perhaps years, she had grown accustomed to being ignored. Thomas rarely noticed her discomfort unless it inconvenienced him. Kindness had become unfamiliar. They ate quietly. The silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. As the morning progressed, Clara helped with small tasks around the cabin despite Elias's objections. She swept the floor and folded blankets while carefully avoiding movements that strained her injuries. The work gave her something to focus on besides fear. Several days passed. Her strength returned little by little. The bruises faded from dark purple to pale yellow. The cuts began healing. Most importantly, the constant terror slowly loosened its grip. For the first time in years, she felt safe. One afternoon, she sat on the porch while Elias repaired a fence nearby. The peaceful rhythm of ranch life contrasted sharply with the chaos she had left behind. Eventually, Elias joined her. Neither spoke for several moments. The vast prairie stretched endlessly before them. "You don't have to tell me anything," he said finally. "But I think you've been carrying this burden alone for a long time." Clara stared toward the horizon. "Longer than I realized." She drew a slow breath. "When Thomas and I married, he wasn't like this." Elias listened carefully. "He was ambitious," she continued. "Charming. Everyone admired him. Did you love him?" The answer came without hesitation. "Yes." The honesty surprised even her. Despite everything, she couldn't erase the memories of who Thomas had once appeared to be. For a while, their marriage had been happy. They built a small farm together, shared dreams, made plans for the future. Then success arrived. Thomas expanded his business dealings and began spending more time in town. At first, she welcomed the change. More money meant greater opportunities, a better life. But wealth altered him, or perhaps it revealed qualities that had always existed beneath the surface. He became secretive, dismissive, quick to anger. The man who once sought her opinion stopped listening altogether. Whenever she questioned his behavior, he accused her of being suspicious. Whenever she expressed concern, he claimed she was ungrateful. Gradually, she learned that confronting him only made things worse. "So you stayed silent," Elias said. "I convinced myself things would improve." A bitter smile touched her lips. They never did. The hardest part wasn't the loneliness. It wasn't even the lies. It was watching Thomas become someone she barely recognized. The affairs began shortly afterward. At first, there were only rumors. Whispers from neighbors. Stories from town. Clara ignored them. She wanted to believe her husband remained faithful, but evidence accumulated. Missing evenings, unexplained expenses, perfume that wasn't hers, letters he refused to discuss. Eventually, denial became impossible. The memory of discovering the truth remained vivid. She had followed Thomas into town, hidden herself across the street, waited. Then she saw him enter a house belonging to Evelyn Carter, a wealthy widow, a respected member of the community, someone Clara had considered a friend. "I watched them together," she said quietly. "I knew immediately." Elias remained silent. The pain in her voice required no response. The affair had been going on for years. Years. The realization had shattered something inside her. Not because Thomas loved another woman, but because every promise he had ever made suddenly felt like a lie. I confronted him that night. What happened? He didn't deny it. The memory still astonished her. There had been no remorse, no apology, only anger. He acted as though I was the problem. Elias shook his head. Some men blamed everyone except themselves. Thomas appeared to be one of them. The conversation ended as the sun began sinking toward the horizon. Neither noticed how much time had passed. For Clara, speaking the truth felt strangely liberating. For years, she had hidden her suffering behind polite smiles. Now someone finally knew. Someone believed her. As evening settled over the ranch, a rider appeared in the distance. Elias noticed him first. The horse approached quickly. Within minutes, one of the neighboring ranch hands reached the property. The young man looked uneasy. "I came as fast as I could." Elias stepped forward. "What's wrong?" The rider glanced toward Clara, then lowered his voice. "I was in town today." A knot formed in Clara's stomach. "What did you hear?" Elias asked. The answer arrived immediately. "Thomas Whitmore is looking for his wife." Fear swept through Clara. The ranch hand continued. "He's offering money for information." Elias's expression hardened. "Did he say why?" "No." The young man hesitated, but he seemed desperate. Clara knew exactly what that meant. Thomas wasn't searching because he cared. He wasn't searching because he regretted what he'd done. He was searching because she had survived. And if she survived, she could expose him. As darkness settled over the prairie once more, Clara realized the danger she had escaped was drawing closer. Thomas Whitmore wasn't looking for his missing wife. He was looking for the only witness who could destroy him. The truth they tried to bury. The warning changed everything. After learning that Thomas Whitmore was actively searching for Clara, the peaceful atmosphere of Elias Grayhawk's ranch vanished. Every rider on the horizon became a potential threat. Every unfamiliar sound drew attention. Clara understood the danger better than anyone. As long as Thomas believed she was alive, he would never stop looking for her. Not until he was certain she could no longer expose him. The realization no longer filled her with the same helpless fear she had felt weeks earlier. Something inside her had begun to change. Living at the ranch had given her distance from Thomas's influence. For years, he had controlled the narrative of her life, convincing her that her opinions were foolish and her concerns unreasonable. Now she could finally see the truth. The problem had never been her. It had always been him. One evening, Elias returned from town carrying supplies and troubling news. He placed a sack of groceries on the kitchen table. "I spoke with Sheriff Reeves." Clara looked up immediately. "What did he say?" Elias hesitated. "He isn't convinced." Her shoulders slumped. The response didn't surprise her. Thomas had spent years building a respectable reputation. Most people saw him as a successful businessman and devoted husband. Few knew the man behind the smile. "He thinks there's another explanation," Elias continued. "He thinks maybe Thomas lost his temper during an argument." Clara laughed bitterly. People always make excuses for men like him. Elias couldn't argue. The sheriff wasn't a bad man, but he preferred evidence over accusations. Unfortunately, evidence was exactly what they lacked. The bruises had faded. The storm had erased most physical traces. Without proof, Clara's words stood against Thomas's. And Thomas had spent years ensuring people trusted him. For several days, frustration settled over the ranch. Then an unexpected visitor arrived. The woman appeared shortly after noon. She rode alone. When Elias saw her approaching, his expression immediately darkened. Clara recognized her before the horse even stopped. Evelyn Carter, the widow, the woman at the center of Thomas's affair. A rush of anger surged through Clara. Months ago, she might have confronted Evelyn immediately. Now she simply watched. Evelyn dismounted slowly. Unlike her usual confident appearance, she looked exhausted, nervous, almost frightened. "I need to speak with Clara," she said. Elias crossed his arms. "Why?" "Because I've made terrible mistakes." The answer surprised everyone. After a long silence, Clara agreed to hear her out. They sat inside the ranch house while Elias remained nearby. For several moments, Evelyn struggled to find the right words. Then the truth began pouring out. Thomas had lied to her from the very beginning. He claimed his marriage was already over, claimed Clara no longer loved him, claimed he planned to leave and start a new life. Evelyn had believed him, at least initially. The affair continued for years because Thomas always had another excuse, another promise, another reason to wait. "He manipulated both of us," Evelyn admitted. Shame filled her voice. Clara listened quietly. The confession didn't erase the betrayal, but it revealed a larger pattern. Thomas hadn't merely deceived his wife. He deceived everyone around him. "What changed?" Clara asked. Evelyn swallowed hard. "I discovered something." The room fell silent. "What?" Her answer altered everything. "Thomas isn't just hiding affairs." She looked directly at Clara. "He's stealing money." Elias leaned forward. "From whom?" "Business partners, investors, anyone who trusts him." The revelation sent a chill through the room. Evelyn explained that she had accidentally discovered financial records hidden inside Thomas's office. Accounts that didn't match, missing funds, forged signatures, false contracts. At first she thought there had been a mistake. Then she investigated further. The evidence became impossible to ignore. Thomas had spent years building fraudulent schemes behind the respectable image he presented to the community. The affairs served a purpose. While people focused on gossip and romance, no one examined his finances closely. "He planned to leave soon," Evelyn said. "With the money." Clara stared in disbelief. Everything suddenly made sense. Thomas's desperation, his violence, his determination to silence her. The attack hadn't happened solely because she discovered the affair. She had confronted him at the worst possible moment. He was already preparing to flee, and she had become a threat, a witness, someone capable of unraveling everything. The truth ignited a new determination within Clara. For weeks, she had viewed herself as a survivor. Now she understood she had another role to play. She could help stop him. That evening, Elias rode back into town with Evelyn. Together, they presented the information to Sheriff Reeves. Hours later, they returned. This time a sheriff came with them. The change in his attitude was obvious. He no longer looked skeptical. He looked concerned. "The records appear genuine," Reeves admitted. "If they're authentic, Thomas has committed serious crimes." For the first time since arriving at the ranch, Clara felt hope. Real hope. Not because justice was guaranteed, but because someone finally believed her. Over the next several days, evidence accumulated rapidly. Witnesses emerged. Financial records were verified. Business partners reported missing funds. The carefully crafted image Thomas had spent years building began to crack. Word spread quietly throughout the community. Questions multiplied. Suspicions grew. And eventually the rumors reached Thomas himself. The response came sooner than anyone expected. Late one afternoon, a messenger arrived from town carrying a note. The paper contained only a few lines. Sheriff Reeves read it aloud. The message was signed by Thomas Whitmore. The room became silent. "What does it say?" Clara asked. The sheriff's expression darkened. Slowly, he lowered the paper. Then he repeated the final sentence. "If I go down," Thomas wrote, "I'm taking all of you with me." The threat lingered heavily in the room. Outside, the sun dipped toward the horizon. Inside, everyone understood the same thing. Thomas Whitmore had realized the truth was catching up to him. And desperate men were often the most dangerous of all. Justice, freedom, and a second chance. Thomas Whitmore arrived at the ranch just before dawn. Elias spotted him first, riding hard across the prairie as if outrunning fate itself. The rancher's expression tightened. He had expected this moment ever since Thomas's threat reached them. Inside the house, Clara stood by the window. Fear stirred within her at the sight of her husband, but it no longer controlled her. The frightened woman who had staggered through a storm weeks earlier was gone. In her place stood someone who had survived betrayal, violence, and despair. Sheriff Daniel Reeves stepped onto the porch beside Elias. Together they waited. Thomas dismounted and approached slowly. His clothes were wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot. The polished image he had spent years presenting to the world had disappeared. Only desperation remained. "Clara," he called. She stepped outside before anyone could stop her. The morning air was cold and still. Thomas looked relieved to see her. "You have to come home." Clara stared at him. The request sounded absurd. "Home?" she asked. "You left me to die." His jaw tightened. "I made a mistake." The words lacked sincerity. Even now, he seemed more concerned with consequences than remorse. "You lied to me for years," Clara said. "You cheated on me. You stole from people who trusted you." Thomas glanced toward the sheriff. "They've poisoned you against me." "No," Clara replied. "The truth did that." For a moment, anger flashed across his face. The reaction revealed more than any confession could. Thomas had always believed he could control every situation. He manipulated facts, twisted conversations, and blamed others whenever his actions caught up with him. Now those tactics no longer worked. Sheriff Reeves stepped forward. "It's over, Thomas." Thomas laughed bitterly. "Over." He pointed toward Clara. "She destroyed everything." Clara shook her head. "You destroyed it yourself." The words landed with unmistakable force. Silence followed. For the first time, Thomas seemed unable to formulate a response. The reality he had spent years avoiding finally stood before him. His choices had led him here. No one else's. The sheriff removed several folded documents from his coat. "We verified the records." Thomas's expression darkened. The forged contracts, the missing investments, the false accounts. Each piece of evidence tightened the net around him. "There are witnesses willing to testify," Reeves continued, "including Evelyn Carter." The mention of Evelyn seemed to break something inside him. He realized there would be no escape. No convenient lie. No clever excuse. The people he had manipulated were finally speaking. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Thomas's shoulders slumped. The fight drained from him. Years of deception collapsed under the weight of undeniable truth. Sheriff Reeves approached carefully and placed him under arrest. Thomas offered no resistance. As the handcuffs closed around his wrists, he turned toward Clara one final time. She searched his face for genuine regret. She found none, only disappointment that his schemes had failed. That realization erased the last remnants of doubt within her. She owed him nothing. Not forgiveness, not sympathy, not another chance. The sheriff escorted Thomas away. As the horses disappeared into the distance, Clara felt an unfamiliar sensation. Relief. Not because every wound had healed. Some scars remained. But the chapter that had haunted her life was finally ending. The weeks that followed brought steady change. The investigation uncovered additional victims and further financial crimes. Every new discovery confirmed what Clara already knew. Thomas had built his success on lies. His reputation crumbled quickly once the truth emerged. Meanwhile, life at the ranch settled into a peaceful rhythm. Clara helped with daily work, gradually reclaiming confidence that had been stripped away during her marriage. She laughed more often, slept more peacefully, dreamed about the future instead of fearing it. Through it all, Elias remained a constant presence. He never demanded gratitude, never expected anything in return. His kindness came without conditions, which made it more meaningful than grand gestures ever could. As months passed, friendship deepened naturally into affection. Neither rushed it. Both understood that trust was strongest when allowed to grow slowly. One spring evening, Clara and Elias stood together on the porch watching the sun sink beyond the prairie. Golden light stretched across the fields. The world felt calm, safe. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Elias glanced toward her. "You know," he said quietly, "this place feels different now." Clara smiled. Better or worse? Better. A warm silence followed. The answer carried more meaning than either needed to explain. Clara looked toward the horizon. Less than a year earlier, she had believed her life was ending. She had arrived at the ranch bruised, betrayed, and certain she had lost everything. Instead, she had found freedom. She had found courage. And unexpectedly, she had found someone worthy of her trust. When she looked back at Elias, she saw a future she no longer feared. For the first time in years, possibility felt greater than pain. And though one chapter had ended, another was only beginning.